Alright guys, so today we're going to be working on that same 2006 Toyota Tacoma that I installed the upper control arms on about 2 months ago. What we're doing for the customer today is inner and outer tie rods and CV axles on both sides. We're going to go ahead and get the truck up and put on a jack stand, get this driver's side wheel off, start taking everything apart on the suspension. Alright, so in order to get the CV axle out, which is back here, you have to go ahead and take off the dust cover. There's a 35mm nut, cotter pin and retainer that has to come off. Brake caliper comes off, brake mounting hardware, ABS wire, sway bar link, and the actual ABS sensor comes out here. I'll be doing the axle and the inner and outer tie rod, so I'll just beat these pieces apart, not worry about using a press or a puller. Since this is a new Icon ball joint here, this will pop free pretty easy. It's only been on here 2 months. So let's go ahead and just get everything taken apart. I'm going to remove the ABS wire retainer, unplug the ABS sensor, run the ABS sensor wire, brake line, and brackets out of the way. So go ahead and jam a pry bar on the frame. I use this to set the caliper up when I unbolt it from the spindle. Go ahead and remove the two 17mm bolts for the brake caliper now. Alright, now I have the brake caliper clear. We're going to move it out of the way and set it right up here on top of this breaker bar. You don't ever want to put pressure on the ABS sensor line or the brake line, the rubber brake hose here. Brake hose is cheap, ABS sensor wire is not. From here I'm going to go ahead and remove the upper control arm from the spindle. So after you get this bolt loose, we're going to have to free it from the knuckle. I'm going to take a hammer, hit it a couple times on this flat spot here. That'll make it drop free of the knuckle. One hit, came right off. Now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to loosen the sway bar bushing. Sway bar just pressed in. Slide right out. Next I'm going to go ahead and remove the cotter pin here for the tie rod. We're going to go ahead and get this tie rod apart before we do the axle. All right, cotter pin has to come out. Just like we did for the knuckle, we're going to go ahead and hit it a couple times here to break this ball joint loose. Alright, now this has come loose. You can see the tie rod has come out of the knuckle. This boot's totally torn. It's no good anymore, so that's why we're replacing inner and outer. It's got some play in it. This truck's getting new tires and alignment today after the tie rod and axle get done. So next thing we're going to do is we're going to take this boot here on the tie rod and we're going to move this clip and get it out of the way so we can get this inner and outer tie rod apart. Before I remove this all the way, I'm going to have to loosen up this jam nut. Now the jam nut's loose, we can unscrew the outer tie rod, get this one out. I'm going to go ahead and remove this metal clip. And on the other side of this boot, there's a metal ring that goes around to secure it. We're actually going to have to break that ring. Put a screwdriver in this metal clip and just drive it back till it pops free. Then this whole boot can slide off. Since this boot is good, no grips, no tears, still flexible, we're going to go ahead and reuse it when we're done. There's a couple ears that have to be bent out of the way, then we can spin this off with a wrench. To do that, we're just going to take a screwdriver on the part that's bent over to lock, and we're just going to push that back out of the way. That'll be like that on both sides. Make sure you get both sides. It's going to be real hard to unscrew this later on. Now that we have the locking ears bent out of the way on the retaining ring, there's two flats, so you can just take a large pair of channel locks and try to get this off. It should be on there fairly strong, so it might take a little bit of effort. Alright, so once this is loose, just go ahead and spin it. You'll unthread the whole thing, see how much play is in here. That's no good. Take off the retaining ring, there'll be a new one. Alright, so we have a new retaining ring. This has two fingers that get located in here to keep it from spinning. Making sure that retainer is in place, we're going to go ahead and thread in the center tie rod. Alright, now we're going to get this thing threaded on nice and tight. After you get it secured, you're going to take a hammer, you're going to fold these little ears back to lock the parts in place. I find it's easy to just do them with pliers. They bend right over with pliers. Lock these tabs down with a pair of channel locks. Alright, inner tie rod secure. Now the inner retaining ring for this is going to be no good, so I'm just going to use zip ties. They work just fine for this. You'll notice a little bit of power steering fluid inside this boot. Not really a problem. Okay, so from here we're going to go ahead and slide the boot back on. Get all the way flush up to the rack. And then reinstall the locking ring. Get it pushed all the way back. Lock that down. Once that's on, we can go ahead and put the new lock nut and the new tie rod end. Now the next step for removing this axle is going to be to remove the dust cover. You'll take a screwdriver and a hammer and have to pry it away from this hub here. Once you get it loose, you should be able to pry it away without deforming it too much. Don't worry if you do, we can always hammer the flange back straight when we're done. Work that off all the way around. I'll remove the brake rotor, we can get a little bit more clearance to get this off. There we go. Now we have a 35mm. So now I have to remove the cotter pin, retainer, and the 35mm axle nut. Now to get this off, I'm going to put the rotor back on. For just a moment, I'm going to reinstall the caliper. Install one bolt. I'm going to take a bolt, put it inside the rotor fins, jam that up against the caliper. So when I jam that up against the caliper, that'll keep that from moving, and I can break this free by hand. Alright, go ahead and remove the brake caliper. Set it up here out of the way. I like to take a hammer and give it a couple whacks here to make sure it's free of the hub. And I go ahead and remove this upper ball joint from the spindle the rest of the way. See, now you have the spindle free. I'm going to get underneath here and we're going to put a pry bar between the axle flange and the differential. We're going to pop that axle out. And get this out, we're going to slide pry bar between the diff and the axle, and it'll just pop right out. Now that our axle is free, you will get some drainage of differential fluid. You're gonna have to replace that when you're done. Shouldn't be very much, probably, I don't know, a cup or two. So once you get the rear end out, the front's a bit easier. And remove the entire axle assembly. So I take a little gear oil, lube up the splines or retainer ring. It'll help the assembly go a little bit better. And this is just going to be reverse of removal. Now this gets shoved in. Once you find the splines, you can shove it in and it will snap into place. From there, it's really just reassembly of everything we took apart in the first place. Alright, so here we are all done. Only thing left to do is put the wheel and tire back on, pump the brakes a few times since we had this off to make sure they have adequate pressure. This truck will now be going to the shop to get an alignment and new tires tonight. Alright, well, I hope everybody enjoyed watching. This video came out a little bit better, I think, than my last video on the same truck. Alright, thank you everybody for watching. If you have any questions, put those in the comments. I'll be glad to answer them. I will soon be doing a video on my Toyota 4Runner. I lost an axle bearing, so I'll be replacing that probably next week.